I just got really curious about what that would mean. I come from my heritage is I am a settler on this land. One side of my family goes back 9 generations, the other side 8, and then various different ones in between. Um, but my but most of my, last several generations have been fairly what's the word? Like unsettled, like we've moved around from place to place. And so there isn't this, I don't have this experience of a very deep commitment to a place. And I just got really curious about what that would mean and how I would, what I would do differently. Um, yeah. So really, I'm imagining that our future and the future of this planet would really benefit from us being committed to place and really caring for it and being alongside and in solidarity with those who have stewarded the land for millennia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so again, just a little kind of background about this series. We started doing this work in the fall of 2020 in collaboration with an organization called the East Point Peace Academy. And now it's Leonie and I and Necessary Travel Collective that offer it. It's generally, we do a series in the spring and the fall. It's bi-weekly. They're usually 5 to 6 sessions. And this time around, we were playing with kind of a bit more themes, which I think has been allowed us to dive deeper into different topics. And I think people have found that really meaningful. So we welcome your feedback on that. And this, as Bruce mentioned, is offered on the gift economy, which means that we make it accessible to everyone, regardless of capacity to offer financial resources. However, we do have our own sustainability that we're trying to attend to, so we do welcome any financial contribution that can be offered. And there'll be some links at the end that can guide you as to how to do that, if you so wish. We're going to have one breakout session today. Good thing there's 2 of you.
Mm-hmm.
Good to be together.
Mm-hmm.
And just wanting to remind folks that you want to, be mindful of what you share and the potential impact on the other person. Please ask for what you need and try to share the time and the space with as much care and equity as you can. And as you may have heard, the session is being recorded so that we can share this with other folks who have registered, but also people who might want to access the information later. And we also invite you throughout today. We don't have any scheduled break. Please take care of yourself during our time together. If you need to get up and move around, grab a drink, need a break for any reason, please feel free to do so.
What
And
time
yeah,
is
go ahead.
the ending? Is the ending
Normally
at
we end
6:30?
at 6:30, yeah. But
Okay, perfect.
there's a good
That's
chance
good.
we'll be earlier today.
Okay.
And we also want to acknowledge that conflict and harm and impact happen in community, and we do our best to take care of that as it happens. And if it can't be cared for in the session, we also welcome the opportunity to do so after the session. So if anything comes up that you, any impact that you're experiencing, any harm, please let us know and we will do our best to attend to it.
Catherine, does anyone ever use the old Unitarian ouch oops thing? You know that one
I
where
do know Ouch and Oops.
do you want to, is it worth saying what it is for Colin's sake?
Sure,
Yeah,
yeah. Are you
please.
familiar with that, Colin?
No, I'm curious.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so this is kind of a bit of a maybe playful, low stakes way of indicating if you've had a negative impact, you say ouch, kind of just like letting the people in the room know that you've been impacted. And then if the person who has caused the impact is aware that they have done so, or is made aware that they have done so, the kind of oops is sort of, again, like a quick acknowledgement and sort of a quick acceptance of responsibility for that. Sometimes that's enough, sometimes it's not. And but it's, especially the ouch is a good way to just kind of like create a bit of a pause, create a bit of space to open up the conversation around, what just happened and what do we need to do to attend to it. So.
What I like about it is it acknowledges right in the moment the two people who are part of that equation, and then you can still move on with what you had planned, but you park it, and then afterward you pick those two people can find each other and try to make that better.
Yep, that's another good way of working, common way of working.
That sounds
with that
great.
too.
That sounds great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Bruce, for bringing that into the conversation. Okay, so I am going to put the link for the slides into the chat. And Colin, do you already have yours open, or what would be?
I went through them all just a little bit ago. So,
okay, right.
Yeah. So I've studied them. Yeah, they're great.
I will give a reference to each one and so that you can follow along in your as well. And if you need any more descriptors or things like that as we go, please let me know.
No, that's okay. If verbally, if you're just highlighting what the important content is, that's what matters. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
Great. So I will share my screen.
Catherine, I should say, Bruce, I don't think I mentioned I'm blind, and so that's why I'm dialing in by phone and have looked at the slides previously.
Okay.
So I won't be reading along. And Catherine, you don't have to read those slides out. You just if you're talking to the points, that's all I need to know.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
and
thanks.
I'm just going to pause very briefly because my dog has decided this is the moment he needs to leave this particular room. I'm letting him out. Okay. So our topic today is the gifts of collaboration. And this is a topic very close to my heart as I work with work as a member of a faith community that's really trying to sort of have collaboration as at its core. But in terms of context for where we have been in this spring series of community care and repair, so far we've really been focusing on conflict and how can we navigate conflict in a way that builds connection, can be generative, and can leave communities and teams and people collaborating much stronger and more connected than before the conflict. And while conflict is an inevitable part of collaborating, and it really serves us when we remember that, and we remember that conflict is actually opportunity. There are a lot of gifts that come along with supporting a group to work in a collective manner or collaborative manner towards their shared purpose. So it's just a bit of kind of placing this session today in the context of the bigger arc of what we've been offering this spring. And now we're going to look at why we want to collaborate. So first, and I just added a couple of slides of Colin, so I'm not sure if I added a couple of slides partway through the afternoon, so you may or may not have seen these ones. Okay. So this one is what collaboration is. And in order for us to effectively collaborate, we need to come from a perspective of what's known as either interest or values-based perspective. And what that means is we're trying to attend to kind of deeper underlying values or themes or things that are meaningful and important, and differentiating those from a potential option or strategy that would meet those needs, those values. So an example of that is, if I'm collaborating with somebody and we're trying to figure out how to ensure that everybody at an event has a comfortable place to sit. I could come up with a strategy to say, okay, everybody's got to have a chair that looks like this. Or we could say that's a position, that's a strategy. Or we could say the underlying need or value is comfort and being able to access the space in a way. And so that is more expansive. It opens up more possibilities. And that's what we mean when we talk about coming from a values or needs or interest perspective. Collaboration is inclusive of all perspectives and ideas. And it's, as I mentioned a little earlier, it's expansive. It opens up possibilities. It doesn't try to shut down options and ideas before there's kind of like a more full understanding of what we're trying to do. It's also deeply relational. Collaboration calls on us to prioritize at least equally relationship with outcome or purpose or goal. It's process oriented and wanting to ensure that processes and how we do things are offering those opportunities for everybody's voice to be heard, for everybody to feel a sense of enough comfort and belonging to be able to speak up and share their truth and share what matters to them. Collaboration is consent seeking, meaning we're looking for everyone who's participating to at least be okay with what the decision is or the direction is, not necessarily it being their best, like their favorite option, but they consent to it. And finally, collaboration calls on us to listen to understand, as opposed to listening to make our own point or listening to counter somebody's point or debate or whatever. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and just check, Colin and Bruce, whether there's any clarification you want or need or questions that are coming up.
No, I like your point that that these are they're deeper than specific strategies, and it feels like sometimes the strategies can actually be in opposition, even though those are the most interesting cases when the need is the same, but the strategies seem to be completely opposed.
Yeah, and that's when we're able to kind of recognize that, hey, we've actually got the same need underlying this, then that is a point of connection, right? That's a point of agreement. And then we can move from there, from that place. So yeah, I appreciate you highlighting that. Colin, did you want to add something?
I really like that distinction too. I think it's super, super helpful. And I also wanted to add on top of that the phrase, I think was it consensus seeking or is that
consent
what it
seeking?
is?
Consent seeking.
Yeah, which is great, because sometimes consensus can be problematic too as a process, depending on the group and what the issue is. So nice, thank you. Yeah, it's all good.
You're welcome. And Leonie has put something. Leonie, did you want to add? Did you want to speak, or do you want me to read it? Just if you want me.
Interesting. So I did to share with Bruce and Colin that I'm getting over the flu, and I cough a lot when I speak. So, um, um, yeah, I just put that note in there about it's important to make room for the outliers, because it's one of the ways that we can expand what's available to us and to make room, especially if we're looking for equity, is that those who come from different perspectives might have different things to offer.
Yeah, thank you for that that kind of point, because collaboration, when my experience is when collaboration is done well, it is specifically inviting and making room for and lowering barriers to the voices of folks who are generally either considered to come from a marginalized background or whose voice is generally not heard in spaces, and really making that an intentional piece of it. So thanks for that piece, Leonie. Is there anything more before we move on?
I'm good to move on.
Okay. We'll go back to sharing. Sure what's happening. There we go. Okay, so we're also going to look at what collaboration is not. And collaboration is not compromise necessarily. You know, we sometimes think we have to let go of something that matters to us in order to come to an agreement or come to a solution. And again, you know, my experience with collaboration is that if somebody's able to hold on to the underlying need or the underlying value, the heart of what matters to them, that is not being represented in whatever's happening, or the idea that's been put forward, then that actually leads to a better outcome. And so we don't want people to be dropping important needs or things that really matter in order to compromise. It's also not majority rule. As you know, Leonie brought up, one of the big problems with majority rule is it essentially by nature eliminates the voices of people who are on the margins, who have different perspectives. And that's absolutely what we don't want to be doing. It's also means not taking unilateral action without consent of everyone who is impacted by that decision or that action. It's not debating. And it's not taking a position. And this goes back to what we talked about when Bruce looked it up, which is this idea of, you know, the strategy or a position where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to agree to anything unless these chairs are being used. So taking a position is not collaboration. Going back to the underlying value or need that I'm trying to attend to is how I show up in a collaborative way. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions or need for clarification. Or Leonie, is there anything coming up you want to put in the chat that I can read out or you can speak to?
Can I just ask you the one that feels chewiest to me of those is collaboration is not compromise. Can you say more about that? Because that one is slightly counterintuitive for me.
Right. I can say more. Leonie, did you want to add something to that? Because I so appreciate your wisdom on this.
I think it's more about the quality of compromise. That might be why it feels counterintuitive, and that we often talk about compromise in terms of getting less of what you want for others to get more of what they want. And that's not what collaboration is. It's about really making space. It's about coming at things without a scarcity mindset, so that you're looking at coming up with the best possible decisions, having considered the important and essential factors. But it's not the kind of compromise that we are often talking about, where there is still an element of kind of win-lose in it. It's more of a compromise that's about expanding the pie.
Extending the pie. Okay.
Thanks, Leonie.
Thank you.
And I want to just add that, one of the practices I find really helpful for me is when I disagree with something, or I'm not sure that a certain decision or a certain path is the right way to go, if I get curious about the needs underneath it that the other person, whoever has offered it, is trying to meet, then I can start to shift by connecting with those needs myself and how much they matter, and seeing the connection between what's being proposed or what's being done with those needs. And so that will shift my internal experience of how I perceive the strategy that's on the table. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there anything still lingering, or is
No, that was
No, and I'm good too. Thank you.
okay, great. Okay, so we're going to talk about 4 kind of key areas or reasons why we collaborate, why we really want to welcome all voices, why we really want to embrace working in an interdependent way. And the 4 that we're going to look at are creativity, efficiency and resilience, power with, which is opposed to power over, and redundancy, and then relationship and community building. So when we think about creativity, and when we collaborate, we're intentionally welcoming diverse perspectives and ideas and voices. We're doing our best to remove the barriers to those voices and to create the conditions that allow people to show up fully. And when people show up fully and they're in a space of curiosity and connection to sort of the values or the key pieces that they're trying to attend to, but not connected to strategy, a particular strategy, that's when a lot of creativity can happen. And I don't know if you have experienced it, Colin or Bruce, but when you kind of get in this groove where you start to really riff off each other, and somebody will say something and that spurs a nugget in somebody else's mind, and you can kind of build on and start to expand the possibilities that get brought into the conversation, and that just like increases and sparks creativity and our our ability to come up with ideas and solutions that are, as Leonie said, this is what helps expand the pie, expand the range of possibilities, is this kind of like building on each other and getting kind of diving into and opening ourselves up to creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And what really helps that is by really being able to see and connect with and recognize the gift that comes with difference, that comes with disagreement. And when you invite in different voices, especially those that are not normally part of the conversation or not normally invited in, those new perspectives can bring really rich ideas, and which then can spark new ideas. It also helps us to kind of get out of our repeat patterns. We often get in these grooves about every time a problem looks kind of like this is where we go. And by, again, welcoming in more voices, expanding the possibilities, it helps us to get out of some of the ruts and the patterns that may not be serving us. And then it also allows, you know, the experiences of each individual to be part of the conversation. And it's those unique experiences that really offer opportunity for creativity. I'm going to pause there. Leonie, do you want to add anything to this?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Any Colin or Bruce, any questions or pieces you want to dive into more?
And I'm with you so far. It's
Great.
good.
Okay.
The metaphor that occurred to me as you were explaining that is like you can't get much good jazz going if everybody's playing the same instrument and the same beat. Like it's, you know, it's not much to listen to there.
Right, right.
It's not, you know.
Mm, mm,
Yeah, and that idea that, you know, in a jazz, like a really jazz kind of jam session where you're listening, you're really listening and tuning into the other folks around you, and
Mhm.
that's taking you and sort of inspiring you in a particular direction.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's a nice metaphor. Okay, so we'll move to efficiency and resilience. You know, one of the great gifts of collaboration is this idea of sharing the workload. When people are engaged in the decisions that impact them, they're far more likely to be willing to actually put their time and energy into making it happen. And that expands the resources you have access to in getting things done. You're able to, in collaborative settings, you're able to identify and uncover potential barriers or roadblocks that might get in your way as you go along, which might help you to sort of attend to them ahead of time, or at least have some ideas about how you would do so, which can kind of forestall some of the problems going forward. Collaboration also recognizes and sort of allows for and attends to the reality that any one of us as an individual, our energy will ebb and flow in terms of our ability to be engaged in things, to, you know, try to make things happen, to do those things that we've, you know, said we would do. And by collaborating and having, again, more people involved in the decision, more people who have a deep kind of connection to that decision, means that that ebb and flow of individuals doesn't interrupt the movement towards actually doing what you're trying to do, the outcome or the goal. And this helps to avoid burnout because people feel like, oh, when I get to a place of low capacity, I can step back because I have trust in the others that can continue.
Mhm.
And so that becomes more of a dance and more of a, a collaboration. Anything to add there, Leonie? Or anything that you want to, Bruce or Colin, want to, clarity needed or?
nope, it rings
Okay.
true for me.
Mhm.
Okay. Good. So then I'll move on to the next one, which is power width and redundancy, which we kind of touched on in the last one. But when you come to a decision in a collaborative way, again, this means that everybody that was part of that decision has at least consented to that decision and has at least some level of buy-in into seeing that through or seeing it succeed. So you have this kind of like shared responsibility, shared sense of accountability, shared leadership. And with that kind of sharing comes this idea of redundancy. So if one person leaves or one person, you know, falls ill or has to take a step back, there's many other folks that can continue on with the work. It doesn't rely on one particular person to keep moving it forward. It can also, the power width can really help with each individual person's commitment to the outcome or the purpose, because they trust that they matter. They trust that their contribution matters. and is valued and was part of what went into the decision or the direction. Again, the work of the organization, the community can continue as people move in and out, depending on where their capacity is and what else is going on in their life. And when we use power with, it really reinforces this kind of like ownership, sense of shared vision, sense of shared accountability for what the purpose is or what the direction is that the group has decided on. We'll pause there. Leonie, do you want to add anything on this one?
A small thing that I'll add is like power with it's a generative culture creator in the sense that it defines how it is that you work, but it also defines like the allowances that you make, what it means to like welcome different voices. So in that way, it's much more generative than power over, or to kind of stay within like the usual groove of things. So it's just one of the benefits of it is that it's a way to kind of learn how to be with each other, and collaboration is a great tool to kind of put power with into practice.
Yeah, thanks for adding that. Any questions? Any need for clarity?
You know what I'm finding I'm responding to is the word redundancy. It's funny with me. It's one of those words that you hear in in manufacturing. So like an airline will build in redundancy. So if some system fails, and I certainly understand it and it makes sense, but it has a slightly negative connotation to me. It's like if you're redundant, you're not essential. And I was wondering if there's another way to put that. You could say power with a multiplier effect or a possible surplus benefit or something when there's multiple people involved. If somebody falls out, it's almost like um you're you're increasing your capacity or something rather than I'm just being silly in some ways, but the word has funny connotations to me.
Yeah, and this is one of those situations where language kind of gets co-opted in a way, because redundancy is often used as a tool for firing people, right? Like it's a way of,
Right,
and if you're coming from that kind of capitalistic
right.
scarcity mentality, which
Mhm.
is embedded in our society,
Mhm.
then redundancy is a bad thing because
Mhm.
it costs you more. It's
Mm.
it's quote unquote unnecessary. But if you look at nature and you look at systems of care, or systems where people have more choice and freedom, and redundancy is a really important thing. And for example, in our movement spaces, especially, like if we don't have redundancy in leadership, if we don't have multiple people that can take on a particular position, or like make a particular thing happen, then you're inevitably have folks who feel like they have no choice. They have to keep pushing through.
Mhm.
They have to show up, or things will fall apart without them.
Mhm.
And it puts this intense pressure on people. So
Mhm.
it's I appreciate your point, and I still want to use that word because I want it to be reclaimed as a good thing,
Mhm.
as an important value
Mhm.
when we are doing, especially things that are volunteer based, especially things that fall outside of the capitalistic kind of
Mhm.
economy. We really need that redundancy in order for us to have these communities of care, to have these ability to step back when we need to, and to care for ourselves and offer each other that So
It's so fascinating. You just articulated my problem with the word is that it almost means the opposite thing in two different contexts. And this is the it's the idea of increasing your coverage is a lovely way to look at it. Yeah.
good. We'll reclaim that word.
Yeah, reclaim it.
I'll vote for
Colin,
two.
anything?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm just thinking about what we're discussing here too, and that without that redundancy, even fantastic organizations or ones that have like a great, agenda and mission and purpose can fall apart because there's just too much burden is carried by one or two key people, and if something goes wrong, then like the whole thing can just kind of just unravel. And let's
Right.
say, yeah.
Right. Mhm.
And so I think when you have what you're referring to as redundancy, that gives you some kind of sustainability in whatever your mission is.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
not sufficient, but it's very, very helpful to kind of
Right. Leonie,
Yeah.
did you want to add anything here?
I'm good.
Okay. And then we have relationship and community building. And, this is a recognition that one of the gifts of collaboration is that it is intensely relational. And relationality, are kind of like care for and focus on relationship, is essential for collaboration. And so, as kind of a gift in when we do commit to collaboration, we're building relationship, and this becomes a really intentional part of our shared purpose. One of the challenges with a lot of movement spaces is that they're really focused on a particular end goal, whether it's all of them very noble, whether it's forestalling climate change, or whether it's having peace in Gaza and Palestine, or whether it's care for indigenous rights. If you don't kind of pair that with part of recognizing and intentionally having part of your shared purpose be in caring for and attending to relationship, that's also a place where community can break down, where things can fall apart, and you end up not actually attending to or being able to achieve what you're trying to achieve, because there isn't enough care and focus on relationship happening in order for everyone to continue to feel connected to each other, trust each other, and all of those things. And collaboration really, again, when done with intentionality, really helps people experience that sense of belonging. My voice matters here. I matter here. And I'm contributing. I'm making a contribution. I can see that and I can experience that. And collaboration helps us to expand and care for the whole person with its emphasis on relationality. And it kind of weaves a web of connections and trust among the people in the community. So collaboration can actually really help us in our desire for community, strengthening community and building relationships. So anything there that needs clarifying or anything coming up?
No.
Okay.
It's good for me.
Leonie?
I'm good.
Okay. So we're going to give you an opportunity to just kind of like think about an experience that you had where your voice didn't seem to be welcomed in a space where you felt like it was inviting collaboration or was intentionally trying to be collaborative. And that can be your family, that can be your community, that can be your workspace, wherever. But we're going to give you 5 minutes to just think about, and if you want to somehow document this situation where that happened, where your voice was not welcomed. And then to kind of like drill down, can you remember what it was that you saw or what the behaviors of others were that gave you that sense that your voice was not welcomed or your perspective was not welcome? And then what happened in your body when that happened? What were the sensations you noticed in your body, or if you can call them up, or what were the feelings that you were having at that time in response to that experience? And then finally, name a few needs. You know, we're imagining this is an experience with negative impact. So name a few of your needs that were not met in the process of not having your voice heard or welcomed, or your perspective welcomed. So Bruce or Colin, do you need me to go through those again?
Yeah, and can you just do it like real bullet point for me, because I'm just gonna
Yeah.
try to hold these in memory.
Okay. So
Yeah.
Describe a situation where your perspective or your voice didn't seem to matter.
Got it?
What were the behaviors of the others that gave you that message?
Got it?
And then what was happening in your body, or what were the feelings that came up when that happened?
Yeah.
And then finally, what were the needs that were not being met?
Unmet needs.
Yeah.
For myself?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so just to do this in a way that works good for me and doesn't distract all of you, I'm going to mute myself here, and I'm going to put the phone down for a bit just so I can kind of focus and make my notes. How long do we have to do this exercise to write this out? You were saying 5 minutes?
I was thinking 5 minutes. Does that sound like
Perfect.
enough time?
Okay. Yeah, and what time do you have on your clock right now?
5:51.
Okay. Okay.
We'll see
I'll
you
be
back here at
unmuting at
5:56.
5:56. Okay. Cheers.
Awesome. Okay. I'm gonna pause the recording up. And we've got about 10 more minutes together. So what we wanted to kind of leave you with is some kind of like key principles or practices that support collaboration. And the four that we lifted up are presence, dismantling hierarchy, and this speaks a little bit to your challenge, Bruce. Skills that invite different voices, and then tracking and managing our own reactions when difference arises. So we're just going to look at each of those again. I'm going to sadly go through this fairly quickly. But talking about presence, and this is probably like the key skill when we're trying to collaborate, because without presence, we default back into what the system taught us, what we learned in school, what we learned out in the world, in our culture, that is not about collaboration. So presence is a key piece of actually being able to show up and collaborate. And it helps us to move away from this idea of a transactional relationship with people and into that kind of relational space. And we want to go beyond just exchanging ideas and beyond this idea of scarcity, as Leonie mentioned, of like this idea of right, wrong thinking, competition, and these other kind of like ways that our culture makes it hard for us to collaborate, because our culture tells us we need to take credit for things, we need to be seen, as leaders and all of those things. Mm-hmm. And so if we want to have a principled approach to collaboration, that requires presence, and it also requires that we are really working to give space for people to share what they have to share and to shine, you know, kind of in your example there, Colin, like really wanting people to be able to be acknowledged and bring forth all of their creativity and their ideas. And we want to also be able to give of ourselves, and that requires can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, my phone switched over to my headphones. We you know, collaboration actually requires authenticity and vulnerability from us, because we need to be willing to share our perspectives, to share what matters, to be vulnerable around those things in order for them to be part of the conversation. And that can be a real stretch for folks, especially folks who are not used to their voices being, you know, invited or welcomed. And we need to, you know, presence helps us to like get genuinely curious about exploring differences and where those differences come up, even if they're challenging for us, even if they challenge how we normally do things or how we think about things, or even how we normally show up in spaces. And we want to do this in the company and with care for the other people involved. So I'm going to keep moving unless there's like a real point of clarity that somebody needs.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
So collaboration requires us to kind of dismantle hierarchy and dismantle our attachment to hierarchy. You know, we often, you know, I've often noticed myself either wanting to take power or wanting somebody else to take it and make the decision. And you know, it's not that hierarchy is a bad thing, but it is often our you know, it's what's, again, what the norm is, what we're taught, how we're trained, and therefore it's often embedded in how we work. And when we're collaborating, we really want to try to get away from hierarchy, because it tends to block innovation, it tends to block authenticity. If somebody, especially if somebody has power over us, it can block our receptivity to feedback, especially if we hold a higher position of power than others. We may not be willing or curious about others' feedback, and that can be, you know, that just kills collaboration. It kind of squashes new possibilities, new ways of doing things. It certainly squashes connection and gets in the way of connection, and it gets in the way of our sense of mattering and belonging, particularly if we are not the person necessarily holding power, but even when we are. Leonie, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, nope. You're covering it well. Thank you.
Okay. And then just looking at some skills that help to invite different voices. Again, going back to this idea of like trying to be as present as possible, but also trying to embrace sort of both intentionality and humility, and being willing to experiment, being willing to fail, being willing to acknowledge when we don't know how to welcome somebody's voice, and asking. You know, we certainly want to be particularly intentional in inviting different voices when it's the voices of those people that will be most impacted by a decision we make, or a question or an issue that we're working on. We certainly want to ensure that people who don't normally have a say in decisions have a say, because that actually brings new information, new perspectives, things that we may not have considered before. And we want to find like new norms and new conventions that really give space and give a welcome and invitation to the people who don't usually speak up. And that requires intentionality, and it requires some different norms and different agreements in our groups. And then finally, another skill that's really helpful is for us to track and manage and speak up about our own reactions. You know, it's good for us to recognize, oh, okay, this person is getting on my nerves all of a sudden. What's that about? You know, and to start to look into that and not come from a reactive place, or not just leave it at that place. You know, we might feel like somebody else's contribution is not relevant, they're taking up too much time. You know, all of these things that go through our heads when we're in a group and trying to get to an outcome, and seems like it's being blocked by somebody, or they keep bringing in a different point or a different perspective. So how do we manage our own reactivity so that we can actually show up in a collaborative way? And what helps you notice and shift into both notice your reactions and then shift into that place of curiosity, that place of openness, that place of willingness to hear when somebody is disagreeing or stopping a process or so-called holding things up. And one of the mantras that really I find helpful is when I'm, somebody's got it, brought something up that I'm like, why is that relevant? Or, we almost had a decision and now you're taking us in a different direction. It really helps me to kind of hang on to trust that there is wisdom in the disagreement, in the dissenting voice, in the person who's not satisfied with the decision or where we're going with things. Okay, and that takes us to 6:29. So I can't remember, are we recording or not recording? Did we restart the recording?
I think we are.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to stop the recording.